So to welcome this first video that we have, it's regarding increasing and decreasing and the intervals that being able to identify them. It also regards being able to identify extrema. So when we think about extrema, we're thinking about minimums and maximums. But first, let's identify the parts of functions where they are increasing, decreasing, and constant. So what I'm going to do, we're going to look at this graph of this function first, and I'm going to highlight the portions that are decreasing. So decreasing, and these are the portions that look like it's going downhill. So this portion is going downhill. So from here to here. And then we'll look at how we're going to describe this going downhill. So when we're describing these intervals, what we do is we look from the left to the right. So let's look at the x-axis first, And on that x-axis, we're always coming from negative infinity, right? So it's just a sideways 8, negative infinity. And we keep going to the right until we get to -3, -2, -1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if we keep going towards the right, we're going towards positive infinity. So the intervals that we use, would be the x-axis or the domain, which consists of all of these x values from negative infinity to positive infinity. I do not necessarily look at the y-axis, only just to tell if it's going downhill. So here, where is this going downhill? So it looks like from negative infinity all the way over, where does it stop? Stops going downhill right here at -1. So when I write that interval for going downhill or decreasing, and we'll use a little d, we'll use a d for that. So a d, there we go. Decreasing, the first place where it's going downhill, we use parentheses for any time we're describing coming from negative infinity or going to positive infinity, and it moves over to -1. That's one portion of this graph. All right, so because there's two portions, we use this little u. We use this u, and it's a symbol. And if you notice, for the number -1, I have a hard bracket or a square bracket, if you would like to call it that. So that means when I start up right here at 5 and I go over to, looks like I'm going to positive infinity, I'm going to use a hard bracket by that number, so 5, and I'm going to positive infinity, and that's a comma in between. All right, so that means a function is decreasing on an interval when the slope is negative, and also when the function is moving downhill. So it's going downhill as it tends to the right. So let's look at what that looks like when it's increasing. So when it's increasing, it's just going uphill, and the only place that's increasing is right here. It's the only place. So increasing, and maybe you want to highlight that too, because this is very brief. So this slope is always positive. That means as this function tends to the right, it goes uphill in these sections. So what does my increasing interval look like? What does my increasing interval look like? So I'm going to type I for increasing, right? And it's between two numbers. It's between 3, that's my x value, and 5. Now this is not an ordered pair, it's just describing the interval. Okay, Now, lastly, we have the constant interval. So obviously, it's just a horizontal line. So that's between -1. So I'm going to use hard brackets there, -1, comma 3. And that's it. So things we want to be mindful of with this particular interval, this constant interval, the slope is 0 because it's a horizontal line and it's just a horizontal line. So to figure out if a curve is increasing or decreasing, our goal is to look from left to right, and that means the x values. We look at the x values. They might also say, use the language, the domain gives domain for the interval. All right. So moving on to minimums and maximums, that's going to be a separate video. You should go on to the second one. Okay. Thank you.